Hey, what's going on, guys? Fizz here once again with another build diary. This is Physics Failed Venture. This is a cold Fizz to cold conversion Reap on hit Occultist. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna do a map real quick. We just finished up day 1 yesterday, so I've not yet started day 2 on this character. But I'm gonna do a real quick map showcase, and then I'm going to get into the build explanation, the mechanics behind it, the why, the how, the what, and everything around that. So basically, if I had to like describe the gameplay, also for to note, I am in like high yellows, low reds at the end of day 1. Focused a lot on scaling damage for day 1, to be honest. This is typically a build, I'm sure you guys have seen it around at some point in the future, especially in Ultimatum League when they added the blood skills. Obviously there's the video, the first video that at least I noticed Jungron from that really kind of like sprung him into popularity was his Fizz to fire conversion assassin on hit build. Ever since I saw that video, I thought it would be really cool to try to do on hit. I did play an on hit pure Fizz crit Inquisitor in Ultimatum, and it was okay. But a lot of things that the build kind of revolves around, especially for fire, is very, very like reliant on Trade League and softcore. Like it is like a very, very softcore Trade League-esque build. It's very squishy. It does insane damage, but it's very squishy and very high investment, right? But I really like the idea. A lot of you on the channel who have been following it for a while, or you know, frequent the stream, should know that I really love like ice skills and ice themed stuff. So I've really wanted to do this for a long time. I've been wanting to do a build diary for this build specifically for quite a while, multiple leagues, pretty much ever since Ultimatum, but I just never ended up really getting around to it. And then obviously like last league, it was a struggle last league to like even make normal stuff work. So I didn't really get to do it in Expedition either. So I'm gonna try it this time around and see how it goes. Eating a volatile dead, no big deal. I know that my like HP looks pretty low, but I will get into it in a minute on why it's actually not as low as it seems. Occultist is actually like very defensive now. I wasn't a big fan of Occultist before this patch. Back in the day, I used to play like tons of Occultist builds. After I played my first Occultist build, I kind of fell in love with it, and then just wanted to keep playing Occultist builds for a very long time. And then I fell out of love with it once I started getting kind of better at the game and like really pushing endgame content because I saw like the flaws that it had. But nowadays, I'm starting to come back around with Occultist, especially with the defensive changes. But I will save the full breakdown for once I'm done with the map. So, like I said, high yellows, low reds. To describe the gameplay, it's like if you're feeling super nostalgic about Blade Blast and you want to play like Bladefall Blade Blast again, it's basically like that. It's just confined to one button instead of a 2-button play style. It's very similar to how it plays. You overlap tons of AoEs all on top of each other that ends up equaling a lot more damage than it would be otherwise. So single target damage is like a little bit of a struggle right now, but it's not that bad. I have to further improve my gear a little bit, and I'll kind of go into like things that I can do to improve the gear. So I'll do a quick explanation of the build first, and then we'll get into the passive tree, the gear, and also, you know, the nitty gritty there with the details. So Fizz conversion, cold Reap on hit Occultist. Basically, the core fundamental of how this works is Reap gives you blood charges, right? So every time you cast Reap and something doesn't die, you will deal 15% more damage, right? This will stack up to 5 times, right? So that's 15, 30, 45, 60, 75% more damage at 5 blood charges. Funnily enough, this also this build is very annoying at killing like essence monsters and stuff. Like, you know, when you run into an essence monster with like 3, 4, 5 essences on it and it's like super tanky, those types of situations are a nightmare on this build. It's just very annoying because you will hit the monster and then a bunch of monsters around it die and then you don't get any blood charges. And then you'll hit the monster again and then there's other monsters and then they die and like it just, you don't get blood charges. So you're basically doing almost half the damage you would otherwise. So fighting tanky monsters around a bunch of like trash mobs or ads is like super annoying on this build. But for like pure single target, Reap is super good. So we get 75% more damage on the skill itself. The base fizz damage flat is pretty good on the skill. When you also factor in the giant more multiplier that the skill innately has. So basically you're using Spell Cascade and Unleash. I will kind of go through the mechanics now, right? So you have 1 Reap here. If you put in Spell Cascade, you get 3. With normal Spell Cascade, you can get 2 overlaps, so 2 hits for 1 Spell Cascade. And then you put Unleash in. And when you let your seals get up, it's basically a multiplier. So every Unleash stack you have, you just multiply it by the amount of hits. And then effectively, like if we took this out, actually, I'm not sure if you cast and then get 1 hit in addition to 4 seals, or if like the 4 is included. I actually don't know how that works. I could Google it real quick and find out, but it's not that big of a deal. Basically, it's like a 4 or 5 times multiplier. You can get an additional seal on this as well, so you can get 5 seals, which would make it a 6-time multiplier, because I'm assuming the seals is how many times it repeats after the initial cast, which means with 4 seals you should get 5 casts. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. It's not really a big deal either way, but to multiply the damage, basically if you right now I have 5 casts of Reap. We put in Spell Cascade and then I do 31% less damage, but it's basically doubling my damage because then I'm getting 10 casts of Reap. Obviously, there is other things you can do. You can get another +1 seal from using a Redeemer Helmet. And then I'm sure a lot of people are probably thinking at this point, Awaken Spell Cascade. Yes, it's huge for this build because with normal Spell Cascade, you will get 2 overlaps. So you have a 5 times 2 multiplier, or if you have another +1, a 6 times 2 multiplier. So 10 to 12 hits. With Awaken Spell Cascade, you will get a minimum of 3 hits, which is a ×3 multiplier instead of a ×2 multiplier. And if you hit a certain increase AoE breakpoint or use Concentrated Effect, you can get 4 overlaps, and that would be a 4 times 6 multiplier with a +1 Unleash. So obviously, multipliers on multipliers on multipliers, you can get a crazy amount of damage and a crazy amount of overlaps with the hits. That's why it's very similar, in my opinion, to Blade Blast, except just kind of, like I said, condensed down into 1 button. It is quite fun to play. With normal Spell Cascade, there is a bunch of shenanigans with different AoEs and stuff. It is, I'm sure you guys know about the dead zone on Reap. It does take a little bit of finagling and practice to consistently hit. I have noticed that I have the most success when mobs are far away by just name locking them and mousing over them. But if they are close to me, I have to mouse right in front of them, like on top of my character almost. And then I will get the double hit overlap. That seems to kind of be the very consistent way to hit both. So the mechanics behind the build, why Occultist? Now that I've kind of explained everything with Reap. Well, Occultist has some pretty cool synergies. Since we're doing cold conversion, we're only at 90%. If I get like a cool Watcher's Eye or something, we could hit 100% conversion. But right now we're at 90% fizz to cold conversion. So nearby enemies have minus 20% cold res, which is cool. And then Frigid Wake, 15% more cold damage is a very nice damage boost. But this is also a very, very defensive Ascendancy node, right? Cannot be chilled, cannot be frozen. And then in addition to that, with the mastery from charges, we also cannot be shocked. Late game, I may end up taking the Pantheon for shock reduction and taking like a Ringcraft or something, so I can take the 3% increased damage per Endurance Frenzy or Power Charge, because late game I'm looking at like 10 to 11 charges total, which is 33% damage increase for 1 passive point, which is incredibly efficient, and definitely worth like 1 Benchcraft on a ring or boots or something, you know. So for now though, early on, cannot be shocked while at max power charges, cannot be chilled or frozen from Ascendancy. We're pretty much ailment immune at this point. We don't really care about Ignite, so we're chilling. Super easy. On that note, nearby chilled enemies deal 10% reduced damage with hits. When you pair this with Malediction, enemies with Malediction deal 10% reduced damage. So what this effectively is, this is like pseudo fortify in a way. Again, it's only with hits for Frigid Wake, so like dots and stuff, you're only getting a 10% damage reduction, so it's like half a fortify. But for any hits, it's basically like pseudo fortify. Occultist's biggest issue has always been like fizz damage. Like most witch builds, it's very weak to fizz damage. This patch with the huge buffs to armor and determination, that took the big weakness of witch and occultist builds and kind of threw them out the window. And now it's like, it feels very tanky. Normally you would never catch me in red maps with this amount of HP. Raw HP, it's almost 6k, as you can see there. 1,175 ES with 4,760 life. Currently, I do not have a source of energy shield leech, but we are using Divine Shield. And Divine Shield is amazing. If you're not using this on a build that has any amount of energy shield, you definitely should. It's very strong. It gives you tons of consistent ES regen. It's very noticeable. Anyway, so Frigid Wake is a nice amount of damage. I think according to my PoB, it was like 10 to 13% damage increase of my overall damage. So pretty decent damage increase, as well as being incredibly defensive. I do want to say one thing that is absolutely hilarious about playing this build, especially with crit, is everything is frozen all the time. Obviously, like playing like Vortex and Cold Dot Occultist and stuff like that in the past a lot, you always chill and freeze things a lot, but it is laughable how much freeze you get with an on-hit cold build that is also based around crit on Occultist. It is insane. I can walk into a map boss and just stand point blank and just spam reap, and they just don't move. Even if the fight takes 10-15 seconds, they literally don't move at all. It's hilarious. So it is super defensive. It's like comical, honestly. We were laughing about it last night on stream. You just don't have to move. Nothing moves ever, and when they do, you don't really take a lot of damage. You have pseudo fortify as well as enfeeble and other stuff that we'll go into in a second. But the next Ascendancy node is Forbidden Power. 6% AoE per power charge. That's clear. 6% increased damage per power charge. That's a bunch of damage. Gain a power charge after spending a total of 200 mana. We don't really care about that. I'll go into why in a minute. And then +1 to maximum power charges, which is a bunch more damage, AoE clear, all that good stuff, right? And then, of course, playing Occultist, you have to take Malediction. It's so good. 15% curse effectiveness is both damage and survivability. An additional curse is both damage or survivability. And then Malediction is, again, damage and a bunch of survivability. Amazing node. Obviously not taking Profane Bloom. Don't need it. We're using Herald of Ice. So for the tree, basically a lot of pathing here. Basic spell crit node stuff. For caster mastery, you need to get a caster mastery because you need the +1 to maximum number of seals on Occultist. This is the closest and easiest one. Mental rapidity. It's also very nice. The mana regen is really good. I will again get into why in a minute when we go over the gyms. And cast speed is also very good on this build. There is nimbleness over here as well, which gives crit, a little bit of crit multi and cast speed as well. But it is very far out of the way. I actually anointed this. It was a pretty big damage increase, the biggest one on the tree I could find. There's also Winter Spirit is a good one to take as well. I think in the late game, Winter Spirit might end up being better. They're very close. They're very close. I think Winter Spirit is technically more on hit damage, but when you factor in the cast speed of nimbleness, it kind of wins out in a DPS threshold. So threshold's a weird word to use, but yeah. So a lot of movement speed here. The big thing is the +1 to maximum number of unleashed stacks, so very good. Going up through the life nodes, make sure you path through the top of instability because this is the only node on the tree that actually gives you this, but 4% increased spell damage per power charge. This is a ton of spell damage, pretty much for free. So very good node there. The next thing you got to pick up is the cold mastery. Why? Because 40% of cold converted to cold damage. This is how you're getting your 90% conversion between Hrim Sorrows and the cold mastery. And then Heart of Ice, just a bunch of generic cold damage increases with a little bit of cold pen. moving on over, Disciple of the Forbidden, amazing cluster. This cluster feels so good. So let's break it down. 8% increased mana regen per power charge, 8% crit strike per power charge, 5% crit multi per power charge, 8% power charge gain on kill, 8% increased damage per power charge, plus 1 to minimum power charges. This is amazing. And then obviously with the mastery, we cannot be shocked while we're at maximum power charges. So this cluster feels amazing. Feels amazing when you transition over to crit. So pathing through the top over here. Y to grab arcane potency. With the crit mastery, 25% to crit multi against unique enemies. It's a lot of damage. I will eventually be filling out the rest of Purity and Flesh. I just haven't grabbed it yet. Basic sovereignty node with the mana reservation efficiency. Obviously, we're playing an occultist. We're using determination. We're using a bunch of other auras. I'll get into that when I go into gear and skills. But yeah, you need a ton of mana reservation efficiency on this build. So we picked that up. Coming down, divine judgment, ton of damage. Elemental mastery, increased effective non-damaging ailments. This basically guarantees that we're always going to be getting max chill. In addition to the vortex, we're using also getting max chill, which increases our damage. Again, we'll go over that later. Overcharge, plus 1 to maximum power charges. Again, you're scaling power charges with the build. Very important because you get so much from an additional power charge. Divine shield, this is basically our source right now of ES regen. I would like to at some point get, whether it's from a flask or whatever, a source of ES leech as well, because we hit so hard and so frequently. It would help. But divine shield's really, really nice for ES regen. Trust me, when you take this node, you will notice. Then pathing on through devotion, through to holy dominion, grabbing light divinity. Obviously, it's a bunch of spell damage, crit chance. We also like the strength as well. Discipline and training, retribution. I path through precision because 1, I need a lot of dex in this build. It's also 10% cast speed, so it feels really good. And then sanctity, pathing down through to combat stamina. Why combat stamina? Simply because it's the only armor mastery that's on this side of the tree. The next closest one is down here with Juggernaut. So we need this for the determination mana reservation efficiency. And then I also path through the bottom side to get additional life regen. Obviously, we do have leech and stuff in the build, but I want as much regen as possible because when you are at 5 blood charges with Reap and you're unleashing like 5-6 casts of Reap all at once, it costs a lot of life. So getting that extra regen feels nice. Needed extra dex, so we grabbed expertise. And tireless. Tireless does reduce the cost of Reap as well as, you know, all your other stuff. So it's really nice to have, especially since we don't have a lot of mana to work with. So pathing over to end here, pathing over towards Constitution. This is what I'm grabbing now. I will be grabbing the full Constitution wheel as well as Path of the Warrior because it gives us strength, which we do want to stack. It gives us increased fizz damage, which we're converting to cold. So that is damage for us. And it gives us armor. So all of good stats, one node, it's definitely worth it. You will notice that I grabbed Iron Will. Iron Will is actually a pretty big damage increase for the build, 10 to 12% if I remember correctly, with the amount of strength we have. Basically, strength damage bonus gets applied to spell damage as well. So for strength, instead of, or in addition to 5 strength being 1% melee fizz, you get 1% spell damage per 5 strength, right? And we have 273, which is almost, you know, it's 270 basically strength, which is a ton of extra spell damage. And then our last 2 clusters here, we have Malicious Intent with Curse Mastery. Basically, increase effective curses, mana reservation efficiency on curse aura skills, 20% increased damage with hits and ailments against cursed enemies. And then the Curse Mastery for mana reservation efficiency. Again, we're stacking that. And then on the Relentless cluster here, basically fizz damage, bunch of fizz damage. And then in addition to the mastery giving us 40% increased physical damage with skills that cost life, this is a ton of damage for 4 passive points. So that's the current tree. To round it out, I will be grabbing, like I said, the rest of the Constitution wheel. I'll be grabbing a socket here, these 2 jewel sockets, and then some more life up here, just kind of like rounding out the build in a few different places. Life node here. So that's kind of where I'm at. I still have a CB immune jewel, which means I'm going to have to path to Asylum if I decide to fight Cirrus on this build. like soon before getting CB immune. It's crazy that I still,
When I'm ready,
at this
and
point,
not before.
have not gotten a CB immune jewel this league. But that's enough of that. That's the tree. That's the kind of like core mechanic behind like the build idea. Now, let me organize my inventory a little bit. Now let's get into the gear and the gems. Now we're gonna get into how it works. Okay, so obviously Crim Sorrows are mandatory. We need Crim Sorrows. This gives us over half of our conversion, so this is mandatory. Next up, I am using Redeemer boots. I just had these on hand. 57 life with 37 strength is actually a good 17 extra life on that, so that's 67, 74 life on these boots. Double res. Fizz gained is extra cold. Sources you can get of that are very good. It's obviously a bunch of damage. And then we just have move speed with onslaught gained on kill to automate my onslaught. For my belt, it's nothing special. It's tier 1 life, some resist. I really needed lightning res with my current setup, so that's why I'm using this. In the abyssal jewel slot, I just have life and cast speed. Onto my chest piece. This is it's a decent stepping stone. I just had I just had this on hand. At this point in the league, you know, I just have tons and tons and tons of 6 links. It's not really an issue to have 6 links anymore. But really nice amount of life, good resists, an extra armor roll on top of that, and then obviously bench crafting on max life is a yes, very good. Decent stepping stone until we get a hunter influence chest piece, which I will get into why in a second. For the rings, this ring's like okay. Basically, I just really needed extra chaos res starting off in maps because I'm still at -7% now. But it's got life, it's got some dex, which I do need, and then fire, and then hybrid lightning chaos roll. This ring is really, really good, except for one thing. I'm sure you'll notice there's no life on it. However, it is plus 12 to all res, tier 1 curse with frostbite on hit, and then a bunch of added flat cold against chilled or frozen enemies, which obviously with this build is not a problem. Everything will always be chilled or frozen. Now, the issue here is that it's full prefix. It does have a large flat ES roll, so it's not completely worthless in terms of like raw HP. However, I'm going to have to hit this with an annul. And I have a 1 in 5 chance to hit what I want. I have a 2 in 5 chance to not brick the item. So it's gonna be a tight one. I did farm an annul orb yesterday, so I have one, but I don't want to hit it off stream. But that's gonna be the next goal. If I hit it and it bricks or it gets rid of something I don't want, I do have backup Veritani rings. Just I haven't crafted curse on hit on them yet, but again, it's super easy to craft curse on hit rings, so I don't really care that much. I just don't want to ruin this ring because I managed to get the flat cold as well. In the amulet slot, this is I believe this is a invasion or incursion rather necklace. Yeah, Puhuarti. So I got this from incursion. Basically cold leech. That's all it is. It's cold leech. The amulet itself isn't anything crazy. Cold res. A decent amount of life. It's closer to like tier 2 life on it because of the strength. But yeah. And then again, with the anoint, cast speed, and crit multi, leech is obviously really good on a self-cast build, especially when you're spending your own life. It's just another layer of regen. Really helps a lot. Super noticeable. Now moving on to the next thing. Finishing up here, we have the shield. This is a Shaper shield with socketed gems have 30% increased reservation efficiency. I'm not like stacking block or anything, but 30% chance to block with endurance, frenzy, or power charge on block is pretty nice. I do have frenzy charges like 1 to 2 running throughout the map relatively often, with an endurance charge also thrown in there for good measure every once in a while. But things are honestly chilled and frozen so much that realistically there's not a whole lot hitting you throughout the map. So what do I have in the shield? I have Hatred, Herald of Ice, and Determination. This just gives me a bunch of extra reservation, and this allows me to use Hatred, and Hatred is a ton of extra damage for this build. It feels amazing, and is pretty much a must, I think. It is so much extra damage. It's 25% of Fizz is extra cold and 18% more damage. Again, it's at gen level 9, but Just tons and tons of damage to build. Like 30% of your overall damage is coming from hatred. It's a bunch. Moving on to the helmet, a blizzard crown. So this just adds a flat amount of cold damage to all your hits. Obviously really good synergy with the build we're using. With my current tree and the rest of my current gear, a crown of the inward eye is 0.9% more damage than a blizzard crown. In addition to obviously just being like a lot more survivability as well. So there's a chance that I may end up using a crown of the inward eye instead. So when you look at helmets for this build, you have three options. You have what I'm using now, a blizzard crown. You have a crown of the inward eye, and you have a redeemer helm, preferably rolled with cold damage to spells and +1 to unleash shields. The +1 to unleash spells is seals rather, is the really big one that will give you an additional +1 to your multiplier, right? So it's actually really big. I just didn't really want to go for it because the blizzard crown's way more consistent, especially like if I'm in a situation like with map bosses where they're permanently frozen and I'm just holding down right click. I'm not really taking advantage of the extra seals anyway. Where you're really gonna feel that is like bosses where you're like jumping around for mechanics and then you hit, and then you're jumping around again for mechanics and then you hit. Like that's where you're gonna really feel the extra seal. But I figured I'd go for the more consistent option. That's more easier rather to make use of consistently. And then the wand. The wand's okay, still work in progress for what I'm crafting, but basically we have tons and tons of spell damage. I believe tier 2 flat cold dispels, percent cold damage, cast speed, crit strike multi. This is pretty good. I would like to get basically this, but with higher tiers all across the board, and I would be willing to replace the cast speed with spell crit, things like that. This is a work in progress, but it's a rough indicator of like what I kind of want towards endgame, just with higher tiers, better rolls, and then also spell percent crit chance on there. There's also a really good hybrid roll. Like it depends. I want like a mishmash of all these things, and then I can bench craft on whatever I'm missing. There is a really good bench craft that is hybrid, a bunch of spell damage, and then also percent fizz gained is chaos. So it's like 50% increased spell damage with 4% extra fizz is chaos. That's a really good craft. It's what I was using on my wand before this, and it's a bunch of damage. But since we already have spell damage on it, I just went for crit multi. End game, I would prefer to have a wand with tier 1 crit chance, and then building around that, I would get rid of the cold damage for that or the cast speed. There is still an open prefix on this, but it's not worth slamming or meta modding because the tiers are just too low for me to really want to do it, right? We have tier 2 flat cold, but we have tier 5 spell damage, tier 3 cold damage, tier 5 cast speed. You know what I mean? Like they're not, it's got the right stuff for the most part, but it's just not high enough. So now going into like the real like nitty gritty mechanics of the build and the gyms. So we have Reap with Spell Cascade and Unleash, which we already went over at the start of the video as to why. I'm using increased crit strikes right now to get my crit chance. I think my crit chance right now with my power charges up is like 63%. So I still need to get it up higher. A wand, I do have a bunch of wands that I've crafted with tier 1 spell crit on them. If I were to use those, it gets me up to like 70% plus crit. Again, this is without flasks, by the way. So that would be a lot more consistent. Would feel pretty good. I think like threshold for like a crit build for spells, in my opinion, is like 70 to 75% to like really feel good, to start feeling like consistency in the crits, because I can still feel it now when I'm doing map bosses, especially like in the tier 12s and stuff. If I have a dry streak of not critting, especially if I don't have unleash stacks, it feels kind of bad. So we need to get the crit chance up higher. And then I'm using Awaken Cold Pen. I'm using this mostly because I want to use it. You can literally just put in crit multi here and it's almost exactly the same, and that will allow you to take less dex on the tree as well. I just really wanted to use Awaken Cold Pen, to be honest. At level 5, it does get cold exposure on hit, which is really cool. The chances that I get this to level 5 is very low, simply because it requires so much XP. But if you're curious on the math, this is like 2% more damage than crit multi. It's very, very minor, and you could argue pretty easily that it's not worth the extra passives it costs on the tree to even run it with the dex requirement. However, I wanted to use it, so I'm using it. It also, I get more mileage out of it since I'm currently using a Blizzard Crown, and while it does give me a bunch of flat, it basically gives the enemies extra cold res, so I'm getting a little bit more mileage out of running Cold Pen. But ultimately, there's not a huge difference between running Cold Pen and running Crit Multi, except that right now, with my like 60%-ish crit chance without Flasks, I feel the Cold Pen with every hit versus only feeling Crit Multi whenever I crit. So it is more consistent damage at least. And then the last one, Power Charge on crit. This is obviously mandatory. Like, if you're running this on a 5-link, you would drop the Crit Multi or the Awakened Cold Pen and run Spell Cascade, Unleash, and increase crit strikes and Power Charge on crit. If you're running it on a 4-link, you drop crit strikes and you're running Power Charge on crit with Unleash, Spell Cascade, and Reap, because those 4 are like your mandatory thing. So that's all of the Reap gems. In my boots, I have Molten Shell, cast when damage taken. It's a given. Faster attacks with shield charge. It's mobility. I already went over the shield, but we have Herald of Ice, Hatred, and Determination. So what you can do, if you use a lower level precision than what I'm using now, you can actually use Ice Bite with your Herald of Ice. It's something I want to do at some point, because it will just automate frenzy charges for me while clearing, which will let me clear a lot faster. Obviously, it's 12% more damage, which is a bunch of damage while clearing, and it's also a bunch of extra cast speed as well. So that will help me a lot for just general clear speed stuff, right? And then it'll give extra damage to Herald of Ice itself, which will help with the explosions and, boom, boom, go faster. But right now I'm just doing this because it's more comfortable for me, especially running a higher level precision, simply because I currently don't have anything linked to a life tap. So shield charge, flame dash, frost bomb, and my constantly getting spammed vortex are all sucking up my only 86 available mana, which is why I really like the mana regen from stuff here that I was talking about earlier. So in the helmet, we have Vortex with Unbound Ailments and Bone Chill. What is this setup and why? Basically, this is a bunch of extra damage. If you're curious as to how much, with my current character, it's contributing about 8.5% of my overall damage. So basically, Vortex with Unbound Ailments is, you have way more effective chills, right? So this basically guarantees I'm always getting a 30% chill from Vortex. Why is that important? Well, what Bone Chill does is it makes enemies in chilling areas from supported skills have their cold damage taken increase by the chill effect, right? So what that means is 30% increased damage taken to the enemy, just for 3 sockets for free. Super easy to keep up. It's whatever. You just kind of like at the start of like the map boss, you just like shield charge over to him, throw down a vortex on him, walk away, and then you just spam. And then he's just permanently frozen. He can't move, he can't do anything, he takes a bunch of extra damage. Very efficient damage increase there. Then in the wand, I have Assassin's Mark and Frost Bomb. So Assassin's Mark is the 3rd and final curse I'll be using for the build. This, obviously, I have not taken Whispers of Doom on the tree. It's just way too far out of the way. It's not worth it. I'm going to be using a Hunter chest piece for the 3rd curse. I already have, this is what I would prefer to use, but you can see I'm like out of jewelers. I've had a little bit of bad luck in reaching this because I need a 5 off-color pure armor / strength base. This is the chest piece I would prefer to use though. I do have a few backup ones that I've been waiting for Harvest to craft, a few Hunter pieces, but I just haven't had the Harvest to get it, and when I have, they haven't had Caster. If you're curious, you can just roll a Caster reroll on a Hunter chest piece, and you pretty much guaranteed get +1 curses because there's not like else you can roll. It's actually really, really easy to get additional curse plus crit chance to spells, by the way. The only downside is that this is eye level 82 and this is eye level 81. I don't have currently any Hunter influence chest pieces that are the base that I would be willing to use that are 85 or higher, which is what you need for tier 1 of the spell crit chance. But this has been such a pain to roll. If I end up hitting something good on this chest piece, I might just use this. I would really like to have the extra spell crit chance in addition to the +1 curse. But again, that just kind of comes down to me getting harvest. I'm sure by episode 2 that I will have this in place. But this is the next really big upgrade for me. It's absolutely massive. If you're curious, Assassin's Mark for my single target right now is 30 to 35% damage increase, like total. It's huge. It's an absolutely massive damage increase. So as soon as I get that in, I will be able to start pushing into, and then obviously getting a little bit more life on the tree and stuff, we'll be able to start pushing in towards mid to high reds, probably pretty handily. A few more upgrades, as well as getting my gyms leveled up here, should make it so I can easily push into high reds. I am also on a trapper because time is of the essence. There is, I'm not obviously playing Endless Heist or anything like that, but I will be trying out Atlas Invasion, and I don't have a lot of time before Atlas Invasion, and I would like to finish this build diary before Atlas Invasion. So on a trapper that I rolled, I have been pushing him up towards Cirrus to spam run Cirrus and farm Cirrus and try to get an Awakened Spell Cascade for this character. If I had more time, I might do it on this character and farm Cirrus on this character, but since time is kind of the essence, I've just been doing it on Exsanguinate, Seismic Trapper. It's super easy. I have a ton of gear for it, just, you know, drop throughout the league that I've been running on him, and I just want to farm Cirrus like super fast on him. I spec'd my Uncharted Realms for him as well. I unspec'd some of the Zana mods to get it. So full in on this to try to get a Awakened Spell Cascade.
And not before.
If I end up getting like Awakened AoE or something like that, I might fit that into the build as well. But yeah, if I can get a Awakened Spell Cascade, that will literally like double the damage of the build. So that's really big. So that, in addition to getting the third curse, will just let me probably just breeze through the game. Honestly, should have enough damage for everything at that point. I do not think it is mandatory to run Awakened Spell Cascade, but I want to, because I've been wanting to do this build for a while, and obviously it's a huge quality of life as well. As you could see, my AoE is a lot bigger than this once I have all my power charges right, but the difference between hitting in a fat line in front of you, I can still pretty much clear most of the screen anyway between Herald of Ice Explosions. But when you use Awakened Spell Cascade, instead of just one line, even if they are big, instead of just one line, it goes here, 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 and here. So you're hitting like the whole screen. When you factor in Herald of Ice, you can literally just like delete an entire screen instead of like one big line of stuff. So it's really good for clear. It's really good for like single target damage. It's just a massive upgrade. So I'm feeling the pressure on that. I want to try to farm that as fast as possible. And then for the Flask, I'm running Taste of Hate. Again, this is optional. I just dropped this. Again, this is like, I got this in the Cold Pen and I was like, okay, I'll try the Cold Reap thing. You don't need to run this. It's just some extra damage, a little bit of extra survivability, not mandatory whatsoever. Granite Flask, Quicksilver, Diamond Flask, just typical stuff. The rest of the Flask, nothing super important. But I tried to kind of go over everything with the build. I feel like, oh yeah, for the gyms and thy gloves. Sorry, I didn't go over this part. Precision, right now running it at level 6. This is basically just for the 30% increased crit chance. If I get more mana to work with, I'll increase this. If I am having trouble, I'll decrease it. You should at least be running a level 1 precision because it costs like no mana at all. And it's a bunch of free crit chance if you have the sockets to spare. And then I'm running a Blasphemy with Enfeeble. So when you factor in Enfeeble with all the chill, with the 20% damage reduction, like we're actually incredibly survivable. Divine Shield as well as the life leech from cold damage. Like we have a lot of defensive layers in the build already, and then just Flame Dash is the last socket. But yeah, the build's actually incredibly defensive. Feels really good to play. Need to get a +1 curse. That's the biggest thing. That's a 30-35% damage increase. After that, like I said, I've been farming on another character for Cirrus. Try to get as many Cirrus kills in as possible to maximize my chances of dropping an Awakened Spell Cascade, because if I could get that, that would be super fun. Anywho, that is the end of episode 1 of this build diary. If you guys like the idea, the concept of the build, you like how I explained it, whatever, feel free to let me know down in the comments. This is definitely going to be one of those videos that needs chapters because this was a long one. Anywho, appreciate you if you made it this far. Let me know how you feel about the build in the comments again. If you like the video, feel free to thumbs up, helps me out. If you didn't like the video, feel free to thumbs down and let me know what I can do better. And if you like the content that I'm providing regularly, feel free to sub. And that's going to be it from you guys. One last thing, I will be live on Twitch as you are watching this, as soon as this video goes live, for like the next 10 or so hours. So feel free to drop by and hang out for a little bit if you want to see the build in action. Though I will probably be farming Cirrus most of today. Anyway, peace guys. Take it easy. Appreciate you. Have a good one.